Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. I was asked why third parties in the United States don't have a snowball in hell's chance. Why is it a duopoly in the United States? And so often there would seem to be Tweedledum and Tweedledee, or the late great Gore Vidal said there were two versions of the property party, one slightly stupider than the other. He identified with the Democrats, he thought were mildly less imbecilic than the Republicans. I think that's unfair, though I'm quite critical of both parties. Anyone who knows much about my channel knows that I regularly lacerate the Republican Party. I don't think they take much notice. It's a big beast. So why is it that third parties don't have a prayer? Well, for various reasons that I'm going to go into, the more technical reasons to do with the electoral system and to do with party funding. But there's another thing. Well, there may be a third party emerging, a significant one. Of course, there are minor parties at the moment. There's the Green Party, the Reform Party, the Libertarian Party, any other numbers of real minnow parties, and there have been for centuries. But Trumpism is by no means over. Even though Trump is out of office, he went out without a whimper in the end, really. His last petty, puerile, contemptible act of making sure the front door of the White House was locked. But it makes me call to mind what John F. Kennedy said in his inaugural address, that he who rides a tiger ends up inside. So what's this metaphor to mean? That if you use some sort of immoral force for your own advancement, then that immoral force will destroy you in the long run. Was sort of what started to happen to him, or what he made the United States do by backing various dictatorships in South Vietnam. South Vietnam being one example. There are many more around the globe. Didn't destroy the United States, but caused it severe problems. So Trumpism is a tiger which the Grand Old Party's establishment has ridden for some time. And it's true that, yes, many grandees were deeply uncomfortable. They excoriated him quite rightly in 2016 until they got the nomination, and then they all fell in line, and they scarcely carped throughout 4 years. There was a sort of a deathbed conversion after he lost the election. At the 11th hour, some of them mustered a teensy bit of courage to speak out against him. Few of them denounced him in the purple prose that the situation called for. Trump has an astonishing base, 74 million votes. Yeah, I know he lost by 8 million votes, but that's still the second highest number of votes that anyone in the United States has ever polled. And some of those are intensely personally loyal to him, not the Republican Party. He's talking about another run in November 2024. Now, will he get the Republican nomination? I don't think so quite, though I think he'll, have a reasonable chance. I don't think he'll get a derisory share in the primaries, but if he doesn't get it, then he would set up his own third party and run himself. That's assuming biology doesn't intervene. He's 74. He's hugely obese. He's got a concatenation of health problems, despite mental declension. Would he be just so raving gaga and drooling that even the most dyed-in-the-wool Trumpers couldn't vote for him 4 years? That is not beyond the bounds of possibility. But if it might be a scion of the House of Trump, the next dynast might be Ivanka, because she's probably the most credible of the lot. She's not so completely slavering and moronic like her dimwit brothers. But so, yeah, there might be a serious challenge like that. People are already talking about a patriot party, and I've heard some of these deranged Trumpists saying, "Oh, the party's betrayed Trump, therefore I'm having no truck with them in future." We shall see. If the party were to select Trump next time, I'm sure they'd forget this so-called treason. Or indeed, if Trump gave his imprimatur to his daughter, and she were to carry the Trump banner on behalf of the Republican Party, I think a lot of Trumpists would say, "Yeah, that's fine." So this is a third-party system. I don't mean that there is a third party. I mean that there was a first-party system where Democratic, Republicans, and Federalists. Obviously, then Whigs came along. The third-party system since the 1850s, really, were the Democrats and the Republicans, the two major parties, and the Whig Party was pretty soon dissolved. The Whig Party in the United States had little connection to the Whig Party in the United Kingdom, or indeed in Ireland. There wasn't that much of ideological similarity, but shan't get into that. But anyway, there have been minor parties. There'd be the American Party in the 1850s, which was a sort of xenophobic Party, Know Nothings, and that's the kind of thing Trump might do. He might even revive the name. There was the Progressive Party before the First World War. Teddy Roosevelt, the ex-president, set it up, known as the Bull Moose Party, since he said he felt as vigorous as a bull moose. There have been independents recently in the Senate. Bernie Sanders was one, then a Democrat, although he personally said he was a socialist. And the early 20th century, Eugene Debs for the Socialist Party. He stood for the presidency, I think got 2% once. And through the 20th century, minor parties have had a significant following, but just not won any senators, not got a single person in Congress. In 1948, Strom Thurmond, standing as a states' rights Democrat, or perhaps a Dixiecrat you might call him. Which right was he about? Only one, and that was the right to deny rights to African Americans. So it was a scarcely disguised white supremacist party. And obviously in 1964, George Wallace, standing again as a states' rights candidate. He's governor of Alabama, and again it was a flagrantly racist party. There's only one thing that they feared that states would be denied, and that was the ability to oppress their black citizens. There was nothing else they thought the federal government was doing wrong. Again in 1968, and taking some states may have had a significant effect on the election. Took more votes away from the Democrats than the Republicans, so probably didn't actually alter the outcome. But the Democrats would have won by even more if it weren't for a third party. Not disputing the third party has the absolute right to stand. People say, oh, you're a spoiler, you shouldn't do that. They have the right to stand. If you want those votes, you've got to espouse those policies. Or even 1980, what's his name, John B. Anderson, if I got that right, him standing as an independent and getting something like 6% of the vote, so not to be sneezed at. Again, unlikely to have any effect. Or 1992, Ross Perot getting something like 12% of the vote. It's likely that Bill Clinton would have won anyway, just by slightly less. 1996, Ross Perot, he was standing for the Reform Party again, and he took a sizable percentage of the vote. It was in single digits. Again, didn't change the outcome, probably not. So 2000, Ralph Nader, his run for the Green Party, and that was easily enough to hand it to George W. Bush, because Green voters otherwise would vote Democrat if they're going to vote at all. And of course, Bush won by one vote in the Supreme Court, or perhaps a few hundred hanging chads in Florida. So, then if you look at 2016, okay, 6% of the vote going for minor parties, which is obviously the most since 1996. That's between the Greens, the Libertarians, the Reform Party, and other very minor parties. So the Green Party getting 3% of the vote, if I got that right. Dr. Jill Stein, a very creditable candidate, and that would have easily been enough, in those three swing states around the Great Lakes, to tip it to Hillary Clinton, if they had all those people who voted Democrat. So they don't get through because of the first past the post system. Might seem very obvious, but in whatever the constituency is, whether it's a congressional district or whatever, or the whole state in a senatorial race or something like that, or a gubernatorial race, the entire state, or the entire state for the purpose of the presidential electoral college. Okay, there are two states which divvied up in a bit more of an equitable fashion. Whoever gets the most votes wins. You might say, yeah, well, that's obvious. So if you've got two candidates and one of them gets a shade over 50%, they get all the representation of that state, all right? But you never have two candidates. You always have three or more, but there are only two ones of any significance, Republicans and Democrats. But let's do a sort of more even split. Supposing the Republicans got 34% of the vote, and the Democrats got 33%, and the Greens got 33% as well. The Republicans would only have got 34% of the vote, but they'd get all the representation, even though they only got a tiny bit more than the other two parties. Now that's a silly hypothetical example. They're never that close together, but a fairer system would say we're going to divide up in a more proportional manner. It also changes voting behaviour, because you know that effectively you've got two choices. The argument is that vote for a minor party is a wasted vote. It's just thrown away. There's only one of those two parties is ever going to win the presidency. You say that, but the minor parties, they could start chipping away. The Reform Party win 1% this time, and 3% next time, and 7% next time, and could just snowball and eventually replace one of the major parties, or a party can be sundered by some great controversy, and Trumpism might be one to do that. because of the 74 million people who voted for Trump, who would vote for him? How many would vote for him if it was a minor party candidate or an independent, if he did not have the official backing of the Republican Party? I think several million would vote for him. I don't think it's in the tens of millions. I could be mistaken. Will he just be seen as an irrelevance in 4 years if he's still alive? I don't think it'd be quite an irrelevance. I think obviously have less than it does today. Much depends on what transpires in the coming election before the next quadrennial, in the coming 4 years. So by the time the next quadrennial rolls around, the economy could have come roaring back, something like that. Biden could have proved to be a highly competent president. Kamala Harris really burnished her credentials, something like that. They could have won a war, or better still, avoided one altogether. But what are things that are catastrophic? What are the economies in the doldrums? And there's rising crime and huge illegal immigration, and the country is mired in a cataclysmic war of choice, and on and on. So what if the woke warriors, the SJW people, the PC language police are really tyrannizing people? Then that would redound to the advantage of Republicans, particularly Trumpism. So it is staggering that in a party as gigantic in the countries as gigantic as the United States, which is, I think, is it the third largest in area and the third largest in territory, that there are only two parties of any importance. Now, surely to reflect the full gamut of opinion in such a gigantic and diverse country, you'd have several parties. Look at the Republic of Ireland. We've got about 10 parties in the Oireachtas. That's our parliament. Well, the United Kingdom, in its parliament, it's got about 10 parties as well. Now, admittedly, there are only two of them are going to form a government, and occasionally they're coalitions. They're minor parties. And in the sub-sovereign legislatures, the Northern Ireland Assembly, the Welsh Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, the London, they often have coalitions, or in county council, they often have coalitions. That's not the case in the United States. So it's really because of the first past the post system, and significantly in the UK, outside Westminster, it's not first past the post. It's more like an alternative vote system, or a single transferable vote system. Or in wards for local councils, there'll be 3 councillors per ward, and they don't have to be all 3 from the same party. So if the minor parties had a serious chance, that would change voting behaviour. There are people who want to vote Libertarian, who want to vote Green, or Socialist, or Reform Party, but they don't because they feel it's a wasted vote, and so they're compelled to vote for one of the two big boys. So politics coalesces around the supposed centre, something like a fight for this centre ground. Where exactly is the fulcrum of American politics? It's shifting. Let's say, look at the gay issue 10 years ago. Same-sex marriage was highly contentious. Now Republicans hardly even carp about it. Was it right to withdraw from Afghanistan as virtually completed the drawdown? Now it's hardly even debated. If the Taliban come back, then some people will say it was the wrong thing to do. But on the other hand, you've got to actuate your core supporters to vote. Those who are fervent believers in a political party, they've got to feel motivated. It's worth their while. And if you're too soppy, if you're reaching out to the centre too much, then you lose those people. Because remember, turnout's quite low. Often registration to vote was as low as 50%. Turnout often sometimes as low as 50%. Sometimes only 25% of those with the right to vote actually exercised it. Now that has risen in recent years, perhaps in response to crises. So a certain degree of political apathy is actually to be applauded. It's a very healthy thing. It shows that the situation is really satisfactory. When people are intensely politicised, it shows that they're disenchanted or worse, could be highly disaffected because the country is riven with political contention. So I heard that William Hague, sometime leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party in the UK, said the political party is a coalition in itself. So consider the Republican Party. The Grand Gold Party has got these various factions which overlap to a considerable extent. Militarists as opposed to budget hawks. But people are often self-contradictory. There's a lot of doublethink here. You can't be for small government and a big military. You've got to go one way or the other because the military is the biggest part of big government and is ruinously expensive. There are obviously hyper-capitalists, but there's some people, interventionists, who want farm subsidies for the red states. That would be socialism if it was subsidies to poor people, and that would therefore be evil. There are libertarians, there are obviously securocrats, there are gun nuts, pretty much all gun nuts. Gun control in the Republican Party largely disappeared about 20 years ago, there were some sane Republicans like Colin Powell said that something needed to be done on this. There are hawks and there are doves, there are interventionists and isolationists, there are free traders, there are economic nationalists. Despite supposedly believing in autarky, that didn't stop Trump having his products manufactured abroad, including Pakistan. So he never practiced what he preached. He was obviously a flagrant and noisome hypocrite on this. There are white nationalists, there are people who are genuinely anti-racist. There are gay Republicans, the log cabin Republicans, there are Christian fundamentalists. There used to be some Republicans who thought that abortion ought to be permitted. Christine Todd Whitman, but she's not been a big noise in the party for 20 years. And there used to be some liberal Republicans, maybe as recently as the 90s. Look at the Democrats. They're people who are very socially liberal, say gay marriage was great, believe that long before it was fashionable. There are some believing Christians, not necessarily anti-gay. Buttigieg, openly gay, and he says he's an ardent Christian and believes that religion shouldn't be treated with hostility or contempt. But very few Democrats pronounce themselves to be atheists. There are those who believe in gun control, the various levels of that. Almost all of them believe in some level of gun control. There are environmentalists, those are the pocket of corporate America. There are hawks, there are doves. As I said, hardly anybody's anti-religious. They're pretty much all Zionist in both parties. It just depends on the level of fervour. Some Democrats are pro-immigration, some are slow immigration. Biden, when he was vice president, he and Obama presided over record deportations, and yet they get accused of wanting open borders. I mean, when nothing could be further from the truth, but there was nothing like proof positive to stop. Proof positive was not going to stop Republicans telling flagrant porcupines. Some people in the Democrats call themselves social Democrats, and there are others who are very much in the pocket of Wall Street. Hillary Clinton would be another example. So an alternative vote would be a good system, or like a list system, and depending on the percentage your party gets, that's how many people you get in the legislature or whatever, or having one vote for a sort of territorial constituency, like there's only one person, let's say one representative of the state elected for this district, and there's some for the whole state to top that up to make it more proportional. I'm not very good at explaining it. There's single transferable vote, as we have in the Republic of Ireland, several candidates, and you write a number, you rank them in order of preference. Number 1 for your first choice, number 2 for your second choice, number 3 for your third choice, and so forth. And you could exhaust all your choices. There are 10 candidates, you could put 9 choices. No point putting number 10, that's obvious. Put 10 if you want. You don't have to use all 10 choices. You could use just 1 or 2 or 5, how many you wish. And your higher preferences can't be hurt by your lower preferences. It's all about figuring out quota according to this mathematical formula, and then calculating it, seeing who's above quota and so on. You could have 2 round elections, which they have in France, Romania, and the Russian Federation. So you have an election, a bit like Georgia did recently. If nobody gets over 50% in the first round, the 2 highest ranked candidates go through, the lower ranked candidates are eliminated, and then the 2 higher ranked candidates face off to see who gets more votes. So I think this system is deficient. The United Kingdom's got it bad as well, because it is unreflective of public opinion, and it does the American public a disservice. It is a gross distortion of the truth. What you see in the United States Congress, so it is not representative of the people. So sometimes, as I said, there's been little to choose from between the parties, but that's not true, because the Republican Party is irrational, irascible, snarling, xenophobic, and so on. Is denialist about climate change, sometimes about evolution, about empirical evidence, and will assert things without any evidentiary basis for saying that about a stolen election and so on. Is hostile to the United States intelligence services, to the CIA, to Homeland Security, to the FBI, to the National Security Agency, and so on, and just became a cult about worshipping one deeply flawed and troubled, academically subnormal, malignant narcissist. So anyway, I don't think the Republican Party will exactly split apart. I think the most likely thing is Trump will have some sort of run on his own next time. Now, the Republican Party's in trouble in the long run because of demographics, not as gravely as the Democrats might like to imagine, because the Republicans have made some inroads amongst the African American community and Hispanics, winning over more of those ethnic minority groups They also had a few such people voting for them, but a bit more success than heretofore. So Democrats cannot afford to be complacent. They can't assume it's going to land in their lap. This sort of thing is not set in stone. It's not to be taken as a given they'll necessarily win every single time from now on. They've won the popular vote 4 times on the trot, which doesn't guarantee them victory next time. So they've got their work cut out. They mustn't gloat, and they must fight hard next time to ensure they win it. We'll see what happens in the midterms. I mean, Biden has just got a working majority because obviously they got 50 senators plus the vice president to cast a deciding vote in the event of a draw in the Senate. So we'll see how much of his legislation he can get through. But the Republicans are looking to obfuscate, frustrate him as much as they possibly can from day one. But so far, he's got off to a flying start with some fantastic executive orders to try and undo some of the damage wrought by Trump, who was a bull in a china shop. Anyway, that's my penny's worth. So please donate to me on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, all lowercase letters. So book online lessons with me in history, politics, religious studies, citizenship, French, law, things of that nature, English language, English literature. So I translate documents from French, Spanish, Italian, German, Russian, and Romanian. And I edit things, I help people with essays, dissertations, theses, job interviews, elocution, and so forth. And I'll be your tour guide here in London town whenever tourism reopens. Right, toodaloo.